Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is JB Fowler here. I apologize for being a little bit tardy. We are going to get started here. This is going to be a good one. This is exciting. So between Shanna and Josh, we've had some great conversations about this. I'm excited too to say that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, right, Shanna?
It is. It's fall, National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, my birthday, Halloween. It's like it should be the national month.
Your birthday? Wait, your birthday's in October as well?
It is. It's October 22nd.
October 31st.
Oh.
Yeah, right on Halloween. So yeah, I'm super excited about this month as well. It's actually, I'm wearing orange just for that purpose because orange and black is the new thing, you know, so. Well, let me go through a couple slides here. I do want to point out we've got lots of really great content here. We'll do some introductions, of course. As always, we like to talk about, you know, what our MSP Blastoff is. It's really about thought leadership. We're really here to help give you, as a service provider, more information about, you know, what you can do to make your business stronger, how you can be a hero in the industry. We hope that you walk away with some actionable tips. I have no doubt in my mind that after today's broadcast that is going to happen. And then the other thing that I want to say, if you guys have suggestions about an episode or something that you think is relevant that's going on, by all means, reach out to us and we will do our best to get that into our shows. That being said, let's do some introductions here. I'll go first and then I'll let you guys introduce. So I'm JB Fowler, our Chief Product Officer here at Domotz. A lot of you that are listening in know Violet. Unfortunately, Violet couldn't be here today because she had a conflict, but I'm excited to carry this forward and help host the conversation that we have here with Shanna and Josh. Shanna, I'll let you go next on the introduction.
Thank you. And Violet did a lot of work on this behind the scenes, so this is kind of all because of her. So thank you when you do get a chance to watch this. I am Shanna Utgard. I am the Senior Cybersecurity Advocate for Defendify, the all-in-one cybersecurity platform for organizations without security teams. And I won't totally drown you in a bunch of alphabet soup, but we'll talk about some of the basics without it being too crazy technical. I don't come from a massive technical background, but I did wire $2.1 million to a cyber attacker one time. So that's how I cut my teeth.
That right there has got to be the best introduction I've heard to a webinar. Yeah. Now people want your number, I'm sure.
Josh, Shanna leads with that on LinkedIn. I think that's right. That's your like wired to first accomplishment, like wired.
Yes. Recovering BEC victim.
That's so funny. Josh, tell us about yourself. Tell us.
Sure. Yeah, so I work with RoundTable Technology. We're a managed service provider. We just had our 11th birthday. We, just to give people a sizing, we're about a $5 million organization. We'll serve about 120-ish organizations this year through managed services and other recurring services. And we focus on nonprofits, and I particularly do work with a lot of international organizations that deal with some sensitive issues and have particular kind of cyber threats. So that's an area of my specialty. But also I just am working with lots of small businesses, nonprofits, helping them with their cybersecurity. I'm also responsible for RoundTable's cybersecurity. And as I'm sure many of you on the call know, managed service providers have a particular threat model that is meaningful to talk about in terms of risks that we have not only for ourselves, but for all of our clients. That puts us in a little bit of a different boat, especially in the ransomware game. So that's
Josh, I have a question for you. So we've been seeing the I'm going to say tag, right, of VCIO, right, virtual CIO. I imagine that is because you are working with small, medium businesses and really acting as their chief information officer, but not necessarily as an employee of the company. Is that an accurate assessment of what a VCIO does?
Couldn't be more accurate. Yeah, we actually have a little 3-minute explainer video of like, because no one understands what a VCIO is, so we put one on, especially in the nonprofit space. If you think about like a Fortune 1000 organization, right, their C-suite's going to have, you know, a CIO, a Chief Information Officer, a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. You might even have like a Chief Data Officer. You might have a project management office. You're going to have all these technology functions, right, that have actual people with salaries who have those titles. In a typical small business or nonprofit, even up to, you know, 1,000 employees, I'll see, they have none of those. They just take the entire technology function and say, you, the COO or the CFO, you do that.
You do this. Yeah,
Good
yeah,
luck.
yeah. Yeah. Have fun.
That causes problems, as you might imagine. And so our CIO service, we used to call it, we've called it different things, but CIO finally stuck. You know, we knew it was VCIO 5 years ago, but no one else was calling it, you know, that consistently in the nonprofit space. And so, yeah, so we offer that to help people fill those gaps.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's actually
I hear
really
it called fractional a lot too, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. Both of those, right, are good segues into this. You know, it'll be interesting to see how we get a response on this. Let me bring up a poll, right? We want to understand from the listeners that are on here live, how concerned are you with cyber threats, right? So let me give just a few seconds about this. Violet came up with these responses. I personally love the last one there. You know, what is cyber threats? So tell us about this. While this is going out, and it does take 30 seconds or so.
I'm so sad I couldn't answer.
Yeah. Do you sleep at night, Josh? When it comes
you know, I was gonna say, you know, I'm just not worried. I think the whole thing's overblown. I mean,
yeah.
What cyber threat?
I mean, what is this? Yeah.
I don't have any information people would be after.
So we're getting very consistent answers here. So let me close this poll. Let me then share the results here just so you guys can see this. I personally am not surprised by this. Okay, I mean, given everything that's been in the news lately, you know, fundamentally people are really concerned. I'm actually glad to see that people are sleeping. But Shanna, based on your role at Defendify and what you guys do, what's your assessment of this response here?
I would say, especially over the last 3 years that I've been doing this, those poll results are steadily creeping upward, which makes me happy, because when I first started this, it was really pushing a rock uphill to get people to understand that there is a very serious and likely risk here. There was a great quote that was, you know, there's 2 types of people in this world, those who have experienced a cyber attack and those who just don't know it yet. So that's, you know, has kind of been the sentiment all along, and I've just been seeing these results, you know, creep up to more and more and more concern. It's becoming a topic of discussion with, you know, people who have seats at the table that wouldn't normally be discussing cybersecurity. They're really starting to understand the business risks that go along with it, and that makes, you know, my little traumatized paralegal former self very happy. So
Yeah, exactly. You know, one of the biggest topics, and this is like this, I feel like it's one of the bigger topics of today, and of course we have a slide that goes right into this, but ransomware, right? I think that certainly has been in the news the most lately with what's going on. You know, Shanna, a lot of these slides are yours here, so you know, I'd like to kind of have you present, and you know, Josh and I'll add color commentary as appropriate. But if you can give us the overview of all this and tell me when you want me to switch slides, I will do it.
Absolutely. You know, a few months ago when the Colonial Pipeline hack happened, and I had my aunt who barely, you know, can use the iPhone without calling for some backup and assistance, was talking to me about, you know, what had happened in that attack. And that was one of those moments where I was like, this is starting to become a household topic in conversation. So that made me very happy. But I think, Josh, you were actually going to start off and talk a little bit about the ransomware who, what, why, hows, right? Or do you want me to handle that one?
Oh, no, I certainly can if you want. I have no idea what the slides look like, but I'm happy to talk. I can certainly talk ransomware.
Look, we're an open platform here, all right? Anybody can say anything.
So, I mean, the WHO are primarily, as I imagine most of you know, the evils, the dark matters, the, various cyber crime gangs, as they're called, right, of the world, or the crews. And what they're doing is getting money. It's very, very simple model, ransomware. It's what can I do? And ransomware is now a kind of half term for what's actually going on, because where ransomware came from, for anyone who doesn't technically know, it's I'm going to take, Shanna, I'm going to grab your data, I'm going to encrypt it so that you can't access it, and then I'm going to say, give me a bunch of Bitcoin and I'll let you have your data back. And that's the ransom part, right? I'm taking your data for ransom and basically as hostage, and then asking you to pay me in order to return that hostage to you unharmed, right, in the form of your data. Now there's also an extortion piece that's so common, I would say it's pretty much part of it, where I am going to take the data, and if you come back to me and say, well, I've got backups, ha 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 ha, so I'm not paying you, I'm just going to restore for my backups, I'll say, oh, wait, Shanna, I've got a whole bunch of customer data here. I've got social security numbers, I've got home addresses, I'm going to drop that all on the dark web and sell it there for $50 a buyer, unless you give me this ransom. So it's ransom plus extortion. That the term hasn't changed, but know that it's very much both. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, I've got backups, I'm not worried about it, yeah, that's half the battle. And by the way, they're incredibly effective at going after backups increasingly. And if you don't have incredibly strong segmentation, not only of the, the locations where the backups are stored from the place of the assets that you're backing up, but also in terms of your account privileges to those backups, right, being separate from the account privileges that got compromised, then you're in deep doo-doo, as they say.
Well said, sir.
And what's very interesting, the first experience that I ever had with ransomware was not even in a professional sense. It was a family member who actually had ransomware on a personal level many years ago, that, all of the photos of the, kids and the nephews and the family at the cookouts and the vacation pictures and all of the personal files had been encrypted from some malware that they had attained. And that was kind of my first interaction, and it was very devastating for this family member. Went back to all the family and said, oh, do you have the pictures from this, and do you have the pictures from this? And they lost a lot of their data because they just had to wipe everything. They hadn't backed up their personal computers. But then the cyber criminals got smarter than that, and they were like, why am I going to ransom individuals over their family photos for a couple $100 worth of cryptocurrency, when I can start going after businesses, cause some disruption. And we've seen a big evolution from the personal side of things to a business sense. But then we've really, over the last 2 years or so, it was about 2017, 2018, there was a big ramp up in ransomware, and then it seemed to die down for a little while. There was a lot of social engineering scams going on and other attack methods, but now we're just seeing a huge resurgence in this. Couple reasons why when it comes to the ransomware evolution. It's really gone from, more of a Trojan to a full-blown criminal enterprise. I did a podcast with a governance, risk, and compliance group, and their number one audio snippet that they took out of it was when I called this the modern day Ocean's 11. And people don't realize that there are full extensive criminal networks that are launching these attacks. They even have technical support. They have, if you need assistance in obtaining your cryptocurrency of choice, they will assist you in that. They have the, malware programmers that are creating these programs. They've got the financial people that are moving the money. It is, the internet mob nowadays. So it's not just this, piece of malware that's causing these havocs. It's a full-blown criminal organization. Cryptocurrency has also helped fuel this, increase, this rampant problem, because now they have a relatively untraceable way to receive their payments. So that just further fuels the fire. Dark web marketplaces, and beginning way back when with Silk Road, and now continuing to all of its grandchildren. There are a lot of opportunities for cyber criminals to be able to pour even more fuel on this fire, and we'll talk a little bit about the ransomware as a service side of things. The public shaming side, the data exfiltration, these are all components that have really fueled this fire. So we'll go to the next slide here.
Yeah, well, I want to add one quick thing to that. Or go ahead, JB.
No, you go, Josh. That's fine.
Oh, I was going to say, the other thing I would add to that, if you go back one slide, Shanna, to the 2021, because you spoke about it earlier with Colonial Pipeline, and now you've got, a couple weeks ago, I think it was called New Cooperative, and they got hit by a gang called Black Matter. But what you're seeing is attacks on critical infrastructure. So going in the UK, going after hospitals, you see a ton of going after schools. So the idea is that the attackers are sort of saying, if we disrupt critical infrastructure, the ransoms we can demand to bring that infrastructure back online. Big news earlier this week, there's a baby that allegedly, died because the hospital was undergoing a ransomware attack at that time, which of course the news seizes on stuff like this because they want to wait, but the death of this infant is being attributed to the fact that the hospital was under a ransomware attack at the time that the baby was in the hospital. So that critical infrastructure piece is what's happening right now. And, a lot of this is happening above our pay grades, but, you're starting to see the US government in particular kind of take a different stance in terms of how aggressive they're going to be at going after it.
It absolutely becomes a public safety and health risk, right? I mean, even the Colonial Pipeline thing, I mean, that caused massive chaos, right? Even if it was just at the gas pumps in certain areas, that was quite disruptive. When you start talking about hospitals and school systems, yeah, it could be overwhelming. So the importance of understanding all of this, and I think talking about this and bringing awareness. I mean, just like the poll, I was actually really glad to see that people are very concerned about it for the most part, because
Yep.
it is worrisome.
Even a couple weeks ago, there was a joint alert issued with CISA about the Conti ransomware group, which that really a lot of people will talk about that particular type of ransomware, but also like the group being under that kind of like name umbrella. But their particular targets are healthcare organizations, first responder networks. So there's few things worse than having some type of emergency and not being able to get first responders out there. That is something that's going to have a massive amount of urgency and need to be fixed. And oftentimes, unfortunately, one of the fastest ways for it to be fixed is just to pay the ransomware or the ransom demand and move on. So definitely becoming a problem and capitalizing on a pandemic. Unfortunately, we can't expect these cyber criminals and nation states and groups to have a heart about what the collective is going through. So
am I wrong in saying that these ransomware folks are getting smart about how much they charge as well? I mean,
yeah,
right, bringing down a business, but then asking for millions and millions of dollars in Bitcoin doesn't make a lot of sense. So they're getting smart where they say, okay, we think that this group can afford $50,000, right? And I feel like they're getting smart about how they go about that so that it is easier just to pay it rather than.
We'll talk about why. Yep. One of the other factors in why this is becoming such a rampant problem nowadays is there are also, you don't have to be a huge criminal network or a sophisticated cyber attacker in order to launch one of these types of attacks. There are ransomware as a service kits, which essentially is kind of like this multi-level marketing or franchise type approach to ransomware that are available on the dark web, that you can buy a ransomware as a service kit for as low as $50. And these malware creators make this particular variant of malware. They sell it to their essentially distributors, and all of those people, anybody that can get their hands on an email list, can send out a ransomware attack. They don't even have to have technical expertise. There's support and guidance on how to make your ransom demand even more effective. Oh, thanks for the article there. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
please drop those out. Yeah. So yeah, they have these ransomware as a service kits. They'll even help you deploy them, make sure that your attacks are effective, because the malware creators generally are taking half of the decryption price that's charged, and the person who bought the kit is taking the other half of it. So you can be just the kind of stereotypical Dorito dusted teenager in your mom's basement in your hoodie, like chugging Mountain Dew and launching these ransomware as a service kits if you really want to. So that has definitely
that are happening, by the way. So like JB, I've ransomware JB with a ransomware kit that I bought from you, Shanna. So JB's like, I'm trying to pay your ransom, but I'm having this problem. I'm like, this portal that Shanna gave me isn't working. So he's calling my tech support and I'm providing it. And I'm like, JB, I see that you're trying to do it. Yeah, I don't know why that's not working. We'll help you with that right away. I'm calling Shanna. Shanna, another criminal, is like, yeah, Josh, I see. Yeah, the portal's not working. You know what? You guys messed up your Stripe plugin at the back end. You just got to fix that. JB should be able to get you that.
Yeah, there's a problem with your crypto wallet.
I mean, a lot. Yeah.
I don't know. I think this needs to be escalated to one of our tier 2 specialists. Hold on one second. Vladimir.
Yeah, exactly.
And meanwhile, I've got a buddy of mine who also, is gonna broker these cryptocurrency exchanges for us. So, if you need help buying your Ethereum or Bitcoin, we can definitely help you with that as well.
Yeah, let me know. That's fascinating. Yeah. This whole ransomware as a service is just it's mind-boggling that's going on. It's crazy.
I have this balance of both terror and fascination with all of this. Sometimes I can't help but be impressed by some of the pivots that they are making. And Joshua touched upon this earlier, is the double extortion, and even I've seen an example of triple extortion as well, which I'll tell you about here in a second. But the traditional ransomware attack is, I infect you, I encrypt all of your files and all of your information, I demand a certain amount of money in cryptocurrency to release those files and give you the key to unlock your access to everything. But as we mentioned, our IT teams are fantastic. You guys are providing, if you're a technology service provider, you have fantastic backups in place, and you've got multiple storage options in multiple places. And we were just crushing it with backing up data for a while, which the cyber criminals obviously didn't like all of their attempts being thwarted, so they went back to the drawing board. And now what they're doing is, before you're even getting that big ugly screen of death, is they've been lurking, they've been perusing through all of your files and all of your data that you have. They're assessing a value to that data. So, do you have health records that they can sell for $1,000 on the dark web, a piece? Or is it just, customer sensitive data? Do you have trade secrets? Do you have what kind of intellectual property do you have? So the value of that data based on the type of company that they're targeting. How much you're typically doing in revenues for your company size. So if they know that you are a company doing, public records, of $100 million in business a year, and a ransomware attack could potentially keep your network down for a week, then they know that, there's kind of that cost benefit analysis that goes on.
It's exactly what you were saying about the whole Ocean's 11 aspects, right? They're really doing the due diligence to understand
what's in your safe.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine all these handsome little George Clooney's out there, behind a computer screen doing this. It's fascinating.
And that includes, and if they're up in your business as deeply as they are, which there's a term, dwell time, which is how long they're in your environment from the moment they first compromise and get access to the environment till when they launch the attack. So the last data I've heard on that is somewhere 5 to 11 days is an average dwell time before they're going to launch an attack. So that's pretty fast, right? From when they get into your environment to when you're getting ransomware. And during that, they may actually see what your bank balance is. So I was listening to an incident response call that's on Monday, a great call called Cyber Nation, and they do a Monday cyber call, and it's incident responders and other folks talking about these things. And they said, yeah, they went in, they saw the bank balance was 30,000, they asked for 30,000. They're like, because we know you have it, and it's not going to bankrupt you and put you out of business. And there it is. Oh, and they'll look at what cyber liability policy you have, and they'll be like, oh, you have that policy with Cross. They pay 500,000, so we're asking for 500,000 because we know that's your cap. You know,
it will actually search for your cyber insurance policy information while they're in there, so they know exactly, you know, like what that limit is, where it makes more sense for your insurance provider to, you know, pay out or negotiate than it would be, you know, to try to remediate. So absolutely. And the other component of it is that data exfiltration. So taking a copy of all that sensitive information. So then the ransom demand now changes. It's not just like, pay me to get your files back, and we're like, that's cute, we're going to wipe and restore from a backup and just reimage this device, and we'll all move on with our lives. Now it's, you know, you need to pay me X amount of money to receive your decryption key. You need to pay me X amount of money more if you want me to delete all of these files, like, you know, out of my possession. And if you don't, then we're going to release all of your information on the dark web, which would just be, you know, like just a data dump, which is bad enough because you now have, you know, notification costs and reputational damages and, you know, possibly identity monitoring, whatever the repercussions might be for that. But also now one of the newest things that I've been seeing out there, I think we have a slide on it next, but is they're auctioning it off as well. So now instead of just, you know, dumping it to humiliate you and you know, kind of have that, you know, between a rock and a hard place, damned if you do, damned if you don't type situation, like, you know, pay or have a data breach on your hands. Now they're actually recouping some funds on the other side by auctioning off all of your stolen data. So
I have a question about this. I mean, you said that you can pay to delete or dump the data.
Allegedly, we are working with criminals.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. I mean, I have a really hard time believing that this criminal who is already engaged in what I would consider to be a dishonest activity is actually going to delete that data, right? I mean, why?
Yeah,
or that they don't have a persistent foothold, you know?
Yeah.
People can look this up. A big company in the nonprofit space called Blackbaud, they have a product called NXT, which tons, you know, thousands and thousands of nonprofits use for fundraising. They had a breach in early 2020, and this exact thing happened. They paid the ransom, and the attackers deleted the data, but they had notification requirements. So, you know, basically, you know, over half of our clients got a breach notice from Blackbaud. So imagine you're a client, right? And you get an email, right? I get an email from Shannon over at Defendify, and she's like, hey, Josh, listen, we got attacked. They got all of our data, but we paid them and they say they deleted it. So we're cool, right? And I'm like, wait, what? So
we're real sorry, and we took more security measures after as a result.
Yeah.
It's exactly. That's exactly the point, right? Which is you're just going to have to be dealing with this continuously. I think it just, once this happens, consider it out there. Which probably gets us to this next slide, right? Which
absolutely.
This isn't necessarily about, or is it, Shanna, about remediation, or what do we do? That's kind of the question.
Yeah, especially as technology service providers, one of the important things here is making sure that your house is in order first and that you're tending to your own garden. It's just like, you know, a lot of us, JB, we were talking about this when we first jumped on the call, is starting to travel and do in-person events and stuff like that again. So excited to buy all the beers. But also, you know, when you go through the safety training or the, you know, the spiel on the plane, it's about putting your own oxygen mask on first, because if you don't have, you know, that lifeline for yourself, you can't possibly expect to help anybody else. So as technology service providers, this is something that is incredibly, incredibly important, making sure that your own house is in order. I know when partners come on with Defendify, that's the very first thing that we do is activate our services for that partner, because you want to eat the food that you cook, so to speak, but also make sure that you're protected. Joshua, I know this is part of your role over at RoundTable. So what was it like implementing your security program internally?
It's ongoing. I mean, so for us, it's been a series of stages, right? Of first, going back, to our inception and saying, well, what makes sense for us? And as multi-factor comes on, saying, well, let's get multi-factor. So 6 years ago, we're like, okay, let's put MFA in front of our core, applications, make sure that's in place, and just kind of casually looking at it without formally defining a cybersecurity function. And then we had the benefit to have a pro bono pen test from one of our partners about a little over 3 years ago. And they were like, look, you need to stand up a cybersecurity team. And that team needs to have a directive and have measurables and be looking at what are the risks and doing threat modeling on an ongoing basis and able to respond to incidents in real time. And so we now have a dedicated team. There's 5 of us, and I lead it, and we're only a 30-person organization. But we've got a team that meets every other week, and we're working through a set of priorities, just like our marketing team, our sales team, everything else. And we have, we're right there on the company goals and metrics with everybody else in terms of what we're supposed to be accomplishing. So that's been a gradual process. And I can't even emphasize how much it's continuous, that we are never happy with our current posture.
Nor should you, right?
Yeah, and it's always trying to look at what gap are we most worried about that we can fix this month, and of anything we're worried about that we can't fix this month, what's the next step in terms of identifying a product or a service or a process or a policy or a combination of those things.
You certainly have to be eating your own dog food, so to speak. I think.
Well, like Shanna's, I'm gonna eating your own cooking, which
the food you cook.
Eating your own
dog food.
I don't eat dog food, so I like eating your own cooking.
As a technology service provider, managed service provider, even for some of our listeners that are integrators, commercial integrators that are dealing with networks and whatnot, you got to make sure that your house is definitely in order. I think there's also this added job if you are a TSP or an MSP to you got to stay on top of it as well, of what's going on in the industry, and then you have to be the one that's helping educate your clients, your customers on a continuous basis as well, to say, hey, we're aware of these things, here's what's going on. That's just an added job that you have besides, like you said, Shanna, getting your house in order here.
And by far, JD, the hardest part of it, right? It's because, it's hard enough for us to fix our own stuff, and we have all the buy-in we'd ever need. Everybody at our organization is totally bought into the idea that cybersecurity has to be an absolute priority, and yet we're still not implementing stuff, not solving problems as fast as we'd like. For customers, it's like it might be something else they have to pay for, it might be something else they have to implement, challenging for their staff. So yeah, educating them about, hey, why this is important and how we can help you with it is to me the biggest challenge.
Good. Hey, I just want you guys to know we got a good question coming in from Todd here, but I want to go over the next 3 slides and then ask Todd's question, okay? So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you can see why, Shanna. So buffalo jump, I got to ask, what is this, right? Talk to me.
You want me to take that one, Shanna?
Yeah, because I call it island hopping, and that's just not the best military reference, but
So the attackers figured out a couple of years ago that technology service providers, managed service providers, outsourced IT, whatever you want to call it, are nice targets, because if the managed service provider is its own entity that has some assets that I can ransom and demand, disrupt their function, they also maybe have 100 clients, and maybe they're connected via VPN to all 100 of their clients, because that's how they manage their client networks, is they connect them via VPN. Or maybe they have an RMM tool, like Kaseya, that I'm sure people have read about, or many of you have read about. If not, I can drop that link in there. And the attacker said, well, if we can compromise the managed service provider, we can get 100 for 1 for our investment, because we can go after all their customers, and then we can ransom each and every customer as well as the managed service provider itself. And boy, that sounds like a great bargain for us. So that's a buffalo jump. And it's, if you want to ask what keeps me up at night, it's that. And that's been the most critical thing for us to say, okay, how do we make sure that doesn't happen? Right. At least to our customers and our environment, first and foremost. So
Yes, multiplication. The one to many attack surface, one successful attack, and we've got so many doors that have opened as a result of that.
And it's pretty unique to managed service providers, because we typically have tools into all of these customer environments that are exactly the tools a ransomware crew would need to put in place through nefarious means. They'd have to fish all those, but if they can get the MSP, it's like, hey, now I've got admin priv to 100 different sites.
Yeah.
Yahoo.
Which, getting back to the point, that's why you have to make sure your house is in order, right? To help, I guess I'm going to say, mitigate the risk of this. So interesting. Yeah. You guys brought in a scenario of some sort, right? Or an example of this?
Yeah. So this is, so I wrote this up. We do what are called tabletop exercises at RoundTable. I also do them with customers where I'm doing cybersecurity engagements. And so we've got actually an ebook with like 20 different examples, but I wrote this one up for our internal team. It's not relevant to any of our customers, but I gathered up our entire organization, asked for an hour of their time, and told them, this just happened. Everybody walk me through how we respond. What are we doing? How are we responding? What's our next action? What do we know? What do we don't know? And then also, what would we wanted to have done in advance to prevent this from happening and be better prepared to respond to it if it did? Oh, go ahead, JB.
Yeah, I was going to say, fundamentally, for the people that are just listening and not necessarily watching, fundamentally, you put an exercise in place which says your help desk, right, at your service provider side, right? People got into the PSA or the RMM systems, right, because your team can no longer access it, and you guys are trying to figure out what's going on, right? So, and then to your point, by the end of the day, right, the attackers are asking for money, right, $600,000 in this particular case, to unlock and delete it all. But then I love it, right? You said, what is the team's response to this, right? What do we do?
Yeah, and it just walks through a bunch of questions like, do we have an incident response plan? Does everybody know where it is? Does everybody know who they're supposed to call first? If this happens to a tier 1 help desk person, and and I'm thinking the scenario, I have it happen on the Sunday following Thanksgiving, like Sunday morning. These attacks typically will happen over holiday weekends. That's been very much part of the framework that attackers use. And if we don't have insurance, it's a bad time to find it out. If we do have insurance, do they have an incident response team that's part of that policy, which it certainly should be, and that's probably your best resource. We were literally just reviewing our incident response plan on our cyber team today and identifying where do we think there are gaps, and also identifying like, how are we going to access this incident response plan if the system that it's securely stored in is the system that's compromised and unavailable. So where do we want to securely back it up? We're literally putting ourselves through these scenarios. Like, let's say, okay, this just happened. How do we get to the plan? Like, dumb stuff like that can kill you, in actual incidents.
It's interesting because, we as a society, right, we talk about public health and safety. We have created this 911 call center, right, in your regions, that if you've got a fire, if you've got a police situation, if you've got a health and safety situation, you can just dial 911. There is nothing like that I know of for this type of thing with your business, which it becomes critical. So at this point in time, right, we have to work through these questions and do practice drills on this. I think this is really, really smart, Josh, what you guys have put together here. And whether you're an IT department or an MSP, or even if you're an end customer listening to this and you work with an MSP, right? You've got to be prepared to deal with this. I mean, Shanna, is this is a lot of this is, you guys help with some of this from a Defendify perspective?
We do, but we would really like to get to the point where we don't have to, jump in. It's at that point, we find with a lot of our customers that they're trying to close the barn doors after the horses have already escaped. And that's kind of like the worst time to put together your incident response plan, is dead smack in the middle of a crisis.
Yep.
I mean, there's a reason why as kids, we did fire drills, and our kids do fire drills at school. Like, we want that to kind of be, practiced in muscle memory, and not to the point where, we're reacting instead of trying to be proactive.
Yeah.
I saw this great quote in an article the other day where they said, you invest to avoid a crisis, or you invest because you are in a crisis. And I thought that was very
well said.
Yeah.
Well, this, if you don't mind me, this in my mind kind of gets to Todd's question here, which I'll state for everybody. It says, is there any way to counterattack when you're under this situation, right? We only hear about everyone playing defense against these attackers, as we all see in football, right? The team that has its defense on the field can never win, right? So is there a way that you can be more offensive towards this, or do something? Have you guys heard of that? I personally don't know.
Yes. The cyber call that Joshua was talking about that happens every Monday, that is my lunch break every single day. We sit on that. A lot of great minds in the industry, and even just other vendors in some of the same spaces just get together and share this kind of thought leadership and different topics, and have guest speakers. And it's fantastic if you're not already watching that every week. But just this past week, ransomware was a topic, and they were talking about a few offensive strategies. One of the ones in particular that they were really talking about was honeypots, and basically, putting these decoys into effect so that if you have, an active adversary, how many times, you're having these types of attacks, whether it's creating, user accounts that you're looking to see how many times are being accessed. But honeypots is definitely kind of one of those like offensive strategies that we see, whether it's, like a fake endpoint or a shared drive, or just some type of like pseudo decoy system that's going to generate some alerts for you, so that when you have some access issues.
That's interesting.
And I dropped a link in there for Thinkist Canaries, which are free sort of honeypots you can stick in your environment, which are basically little landmines that attackers can land on that will throw you a notification that someone is in your environment. So I can create a Word document, call it, budgets and reconciliations, or something juicy like passwords or whatever I want to call it. And anyone opens it, I get a notification. Hey, someone just opened that document. Here's the IP address. Here's the data we know on it. And that might tell me someone's poking around where they shouldn't be. So that's a quick way. I would. Oh, go ahead, JP. Sorry.
I was going to say that still strikes me as somewhat of a defensive tool, right, out there. Right, you are putting a landmine in place just so that if somebody crosses this particular boundary, we get an alert, a notification, or so. I mean, I guess nothing physically happens to them other than exposure, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the short answer to, I think, Todd's question from my perspective, but Shannon or JB, if you disagree, is it would be very ill-advised, in my opinion, for anyone who is not, under the protection of a government agency or contracted to do this in a legal way, to be going after attackers. And I can't say this clearly enough, it is illegal to hack people in this country. That is a crime. Whether you can't go and perform offensive cyber actions against other entities legally in the US, as far as I am aware, unless that is your job and you're being sanctioned. So I wouldn't recommend. Plus, you're almost certainly nowhere near as good as they are at this. And it's a very
My
bad
Russian's
fight.
not good enough. I know that.
It's a very bad fight to pick. What I would say your best, is what's referred to as pen testing or red teaming. Attack yourself. So long-term name for it is adversary emulation, right? There's lots of different ways to do this, but get someone to attack you. Defendify offers as part of their services, ethical hacking. So you can say, hey, come make a run at our website, make a run at our web application, make a run at our network, and tell us how you got in, right?
Yeah.
So adversary emulation, attack yourself
Yep.
with people who, are thinking the way the attackers are.
And not necessarily like offensive strategy, but I would say more like yeah, it's preventive, but not. But one of the other things that I really love is user and entity behavioral analytics, so that you have a really, really clear understanding across all of your attack surfaces what your baseline of normal is, so that you can look for anything outside of that normal baseline. So if we know that Shanna typically works Monday through Friday, we'll say like 8 to 5 from Maine, and I log in on a PC device, and I use Chrome for my browser, and I typically use my my Outlook application to check my email, and like that's my standard user behavior. And then we see something outside of that, that's usually that's a good strategy, like kind of to know what is not normal, is having that good baseline of what normal is.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it gets fairly complex doing that, but yes, I can understand how that would how that makes sense.
Oh, that's why we got all that machine learning.
Yeah, exactly. What's that AI thing you're talking about?
Well, if it's written in Python, it's machine learning. If it's written in PowerPoint, it's artificial intelligence.
Ah, I had no idea about that distinction. That's
Yes,
genius.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
genius. Hey, I want to be cognizant of a couple things here. We're 45 minutes in. There's really not a set time for this, but I also that's bring awareness to us as panelists. But I also want to make the point that if anybody does have any questions, comments, thoughts, absolutely they can use the GoToWebinar control panel to let us know your thoughts, just like Todd did. So that being said, Josh, what about this slide?
Sure. So if you are a technology service provider, managed service provider, you're providing services to clients, you have, at least if you're like folks in the peer groups that I'm in the conference, you have a challenge. So you have a bunch of customers that probably don't have all the security in place that you'd like them to have. And you decide, hey, we're going to bring in some new security tools. So we're going to bring in a Defendify that has all of these fantastic services, tools, policies that we can now provide to our customers and really take their cybersecurity posture from, to nice and a good cybersecurity posture, right? But that has additional cost for us. So we'll add it as an upsell. So we'll say, hey, for another $10 a seat, we can add this wonderful Defendify program to our package, and you're going to get awareness training for staff, you're going to get phishing simulation, it's all going to be measurable, you're going to get policy, you're going to get all this wonderful stuff. And this could be, endpoint protection tools, this could be network monitoring tools, this could be stuff like Domotz that provides really good information about what's going on the networks that you're managing, right? And so that has a cost, and you now have to decide, right? Are we going to upsell this to our clients, right? Yeah. And say, we have this additional security, and it's going to cost, if we add Domotz and we add Defendify, we give you the double D, right? And you're going to be super secure, but it's going to be like another $15 a month, per seat. And the client says, go ahead.
I think we just found our new marketing campaign, Shanna.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know if Dunkin' Donuts is going to be happy about that, though.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
But so you have the problem of you add it as like additional security services, but now if clients don't buy it, you have clients that have a lot of risk that you're kind of owning.
Yes.
And
you let the patient be the doctor.
Yeah. Or you take your per seat price up really high, and now I'm not competitive with the other, other managed service providers who have a much lower per seat or per device cost. So what the previous slide was about was just we decided, you know what, we're just going to set our base price high enough that we can put all the security in it, not only that we have now, but that we're going to have a year from now, because we know we're going to probably add things, swap things out. So we wanted to basically say, have our margin at a point where like, we're just going to give everybody all the security that we think everybody's supposed to have. And the only challenge we're going to have is whatever behavior change they need to adopt, in terms of user changes and things like that, which is its own problem. But we're not going to have price conversations. They're either a customer or they're not. And if you're a customer, you get all the security we have.
And all of your customers freaked out, found other managed service providers, said, that's it, we're out, we can't afford it. They didn't absorb the price increase very well, or that was just all the story that you told yourself was going to happen, but it didn't.
Yeah, no, we actually grew at our biggest year in 2020.
That's awesome. So Josh, I was at Channel Pro just earlier this week. It was in Raleigh, and of course I'm talking about Domotz and stuff, but I was really also as a product manager guy, I was really asking, was like, hey, tell me your biggest pain points that are out there. And which, nothing about Domotz, right? He actually brought up, he says, my biggest concern that I have right now is cybersecurity. I'm kind of paraphrasing, of course, but it is cybersecurity. But it is that there are so many options within cybersecurity that I have to upsell and manage. And there's all these different services that deal with backups and that deal with threat detection, and then there's processes, right? How do you get these processes in place and train, right? So there's so many tools that when he adds up all of the costs, and I'll just throw out numbers, right? But he's saying, it used to be, it was $10 per person, right, for the traditional RMM and PC laptop. But when you start adding all the security, now it's like $25. And it's a huge jump. And he's having a tough time mitigating that and talking about that with their customers. And in some sense, you just covered that, right? I mean, you just said you got to do it.
Yeah. But there are arguments for both sides. I don't want to get into too much of it now. If you sell security as its own thing, it can be a way to get a foothold into a competitor environment. So if a competitor is not, they can buy the security from us because it's a separate service. And now we have a relationship with someone, and maybe we can take over the managed services piece because their incumbent wasn't doing the security. So there is some advantages to being able to sell it separately, but there's challenges with that as well. But even if you were offering like a standalone security thing, you want to price it in such a way, you're going to have to change it. You are. You're going to add some tool, remove some tool. So don't name the tools, name the service, and price it in a way so if you need to add something that adds another $5 a month to your seat cost, you're still profitable. You're still at a margin.
Well, it gets kind of back to that Starbucks model, if you will, right? I mean, they fundamentally sell coffee, but you go to Starbucks for the experience and the overall solution, right? The environment. And I think you as a technology service provider need to somehow get across that you're providing an overarching solution, right? An experience. And it's not about speeds and feeds of the particular tools or services, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're not buying a backup service. You want to know that if something bad ever happens, that you're not going to lose, an entire day or more of what happened in your business. Everything's going to be able to be restored. You've got kind of like that, like quick rewind button. Like you're not buying a particular like backup service.
Right.
It's the business result that they're buying, not that one particular tool. That way you can swap things out as you please, and as your 3-year contract expires and you can finally find a new vendor. One of the, if you go back just a second for a slide, one of the other things too is that there's no one size fits all approach for anybody when it comes to security, and sometimes one of the things we hear a lot is like, well, how much security protection is enough? And you want to make sure that you have that trusted advisor relationship with your client. I am not a big fan of going in with, your gold, silver, bronze package for cybersecurity services, because then you're you're giving some of that control back to your customers or your clients, that they are entrusting you to help them make those decisions. Like if they were capable of making those decisions and managing their technology on an ongoing basis, they probably wouldn't be doing business with you. They want to focus on what they went into business for to begin with, not, you know, their security or their day-to-day technology needs. So like putting them back into the driver's seat and giving them options on that, if you don't have a really good basis of education, it can get, you know, kind of ugly kind of quickly. So my recommendation is always just a standard core essential offering for cybersecurity, whatever that looks like for your clients, your margins, whatever. Few things I definitely recommend, you know, a risk assessment that you do with them, whether it's a, you know, crazy tab spreadsheet or, you know, whatever, our health checkup, policies, technology and scanning tools, you know, vulnerability management program, perimeter vulnerability scanning, user awareness training and testing, big thing. You know, we also include some compromise, like credential compromise. You know, you probably have an endpoint antivirus solution in there, whatever your stack looks like for your basic core package, whether you're charging extra for it or baking it in. And then outside of that, based on that, you know, conversation that you have with the clients, then if they have requirements for additional security needs, then you can layer in some additional kind of more advanced cybersecurity services based on that relationship that you have and why it makes sense for them.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, having the basics is just, it's got to meet the needs that Josh was talking about, right? The minimums. So
yep.
Good. I think this is an important slide, quite frankly, having that conversation and educating, right? Isn't that what this is about here?
Absolutely. I do a lot of like role plays with our partners about, you know, what their concerns and their fears are as far as going to their clients about cybersecurity services. And we always hear, you know, the same types of fears and objections. It's going to be, well, I thought you were already providing this for me. You know, why do I need additional services? Like, am I not protected? You know, all of those, like obviously budget is really important, but the proper, like a really successful outline if you're going to go sell these to your clients and having the conversation is that we use our risk assessment tool, starting off with outlining the difference between the services that you're currently providing them and what they're paying you for right now, and you know, the security side of things. There's a difference between making sure that their technology functions for them and supports their business day to day, and protecting the, you know, integrity, the confidentiality of their data. So having like kind of differentiating and creating some separation between, you know, this is what you have me for and this is what security requires. And then also talking about the changing cyber landscape. One of my favorite questions that we've adopted is, you know, if you had to rate your concern, kind of like we did in the beginning of this webinar about cyber threats, from, you know, 0, what cyber threat, to 10, I don't sleep at night, where would you rank it right now? A lot of people will put it in like 5 and above. If you ask them where they would have ranked that 5 years ago, you know, it will be a lot of times like 5 and below. So then identifying for them that in that 5 years where it went from a 3 to an 8, we really haven't implemented a lot of technology solutions in that time period to address this increasing risk, you know, and asking them, do you feel like we're staying ahead of or like falling behind the cyber attackers? You know, we're obviously, if you pick up the news anytime, we're kind of falling behind a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that education, the changing cyber landscape, you know, what it looks like out in the wild dark web west. And then going through with them and just like using, you know, either a third-party tool or your own type of spreadsheet or, you know, risk assessment, and helping them to identify their areas of risk. And then more so, like, don't drown them in a bowl of alphabet soup. Talk to them about what that business impact looks like. Ransomware, using our topic of today, you know, if they had a ransomware incident, and just making this as simple as possible, if no money came in for a week and all their fixed expense money had to go out, payroll, you know, building expenses, whatever it might be, if all that money had to go out and nothing came in, what does that look like? And then that way they have a really good picture of what that business impact and that risk looks like, and in the language of their job role. You know, if you're talking to a CFO, it's about money. If you're talking to a COO, it's operations coming to a dead halt. Like, speak to them in their language.
That is a really good point, right? You gotta look at who you're talking to, right? As a service provider that's trying to sell these services out to a potential client or a new client or a current client for that matter, you got to use their language that makes sense to them.
Yep.
Such a good point. Good.
This is just kind of a little example of with our risk assessment, it gives them, straight talk, not tech talk, recommendations, remediation points, and then you can kind of go through that. I love to make that a living document too, so that every time you're discussing, as Joshua talked about, their cyber posture internally at RoundTable is always, an ongoing discussion. It's always a moving target, continuous improvement. You can make this a living document and update, their answers, formulate kind of like a quarterly plan of implementation based on their budget or their needs or their timeline of when they're going to address some of those risks, or if they're willing to accept some of those risks, or if they're going to transfer them maybe to another third party, cloud adoption, cyber insurance provider, whatever they think that risk mitigation strategy would be.
So many of the and Shanna, you and I are in SCA, right? They've got this kind of cybersecurity team or organization within it that they're bringing up, and so much of that is actually about process, right? Whether you're SOC 2 compliant or NIST, or you're using other frameworks like CMMC, right? So much of that is making sure that you have a continuous assessment of your company or the vendors you're using even, right? And making sure that that's always updated as much as possible. So I'm glad to see you guys putting this in place. And I know Defendify does a really good job of helping with that stuff. So,
and I think this is actually going to be kind of our topic of conversation here at Defendify with all of our blog posts, and a webinar that we're going to do next month is really talking about the cyber insurance wrench, because there's not a week that goes by that this is not coming up in our conversations with our partners and our customers. Huge. Yep. 15% premium increases, 40%, 50% for our technology service provider partners, their clients. We've had people that, like some of our partners have come to us and said, hey, my client just got told by their cyber insurance company that they are uninsurable, or because they use a managed service provider partner that utilizes I won't drop any names, but big technology vendor that's had a security incident in the last year-ish, and saying if you continue using this managed service provider who uses XYZ product, we're not going to cover you anymore. I had one partner that lost one of their biggest clients because the insurance company said you can't work with that managed service provider partner anymore. Wow. So yeah, big denials, big premium increases. Also, huge amounts of risk assessments. The threat modeling is changing on this, obviously, because it's insurance and the threats change, and people are getting these 17 tab Excel assessments to identify what cyber measures they have in place. It's kind of like the insurance plugin that shows you how you drive and recalculates your premiums, but it's just coming in a big Excel questionnaire now. And some of them they have to have mandatory controls in place before they will even be, given a quote for a cyber liability premium. You have to have multi-factor authentication enabled. You have a lot of those things. So this has been a huge driver in the industry recently.
Well, and it's absolutely because it's the insurance companies that are paying out for the issues, right? It's costing them real money, and that's the risk for them has gone way up. So now they're imposing controls. We actually just did a webinar a couple weeks ago about regulations, right? And how a lot of these things, like the Colonial Pipeline issue, is now driving regulations on MSPs and what that means. And it's very bifurcated on whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, and that's okay. It was a conversation.
We call them bacon fences.
Yeah, bacon fences. Yes, I like it. I like it a lot.
It's okay, Joshua. You can laugh. You don't have to hold it in.
I mean, Josh, what do you see in this area? I mean, you're dealing with this, right?
Yeah, I mean the insurance companies in a way created this problem because they saw an opportunity to sell cyber liability insurance to people. No one understood what it was, but people was like, it was a good idea and it was inexpensive. And so they started selling it, but they didn't really understand what the risk was. And now you had someone who had, you know, $500,000 insurance policy against something happening, and the attackers were like, huh. Like,
yeah. I can get a half.
before maybe I probably would have struggled to get 10 grand out of this company, but now there's some big pocket insurance provider that will just pay the insurance. And, you know, much like healthcare, right? You know, I mean, if we all had to pay out of pocket for an MRI, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't cost $3,400 to get an MRI. They'd probably find a way to do it less expensively. But if someone else is paying the bill, then sure. So they started paying the bills. The ransomware exploded. And now they're saying, oh, actually, you know, now that we're losing money on this, we need to get serious about it. But at the same time, this problem is now huge. So the companies do want the insurance because they recognize there's a really meaningful risk that I'd like to transfer here. But if you're like, don't have multi-factor, they're just going to say, get out of here. You know, literally, you can't, if you don't have multi-factor, you're not getting insured. And increasingly, as Shannon's pointing out, you know, they're getting much more rigorous in what they're going to ask you and how much they're going to check out your infrastructure before they're going to insure you.
Yeah, so true.
It's all good. It's a pain in the butt, but it's because it's going to force people to get more secure or go out of business.
Yep. That was actually exactly one of the topics that was brought up on that regulatory discussion, which is it's going to, and these were comments coming in from the listeners, is that regulations are going to weed out the trunk slammers, if I can say it that way. Right. So. Good.
I've had 2 DoD contractors that said, I'm just going to drop the government portion of my business because I'm not doing anything for CMMC. And I'm like, yeah, but like these are also things that you probably should be doing to begin with, no matter who you're providing these services for. But what do I know about this?
That's the thing, when you look at all these, it's like not that different. Even like going over to like privacy regulations like SHIELD and GDPR, like it's not, they're not asking you to do anything that's that crazy.
Yeah. Well, so much of
data, like train your staff, have policies, make sure people are actually complying with the policies. Like, you know,
I mean, we're
aggregation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're a SOC 2 compliant company, so we've looked at a lot of this, but SOC 2, NIST, CMMC, gosh, I can name probably 6 others, right? They fundamentally do a lot of the same thing, and they force a lot of really good, healthy processes, right? So it's a good thing, I think, and people are going to have to go through it. And if they, unfortunately, it's just going to be a cost of doing business, just like you may hire a CPA, you may hire a lawyer, right, to meet some of the needs that you don't fulfill. You're going to have something, I mean, like you, Josh, right, a VCIO that can help us navigate through these waters that are there. So, let me actually, in the interest of time, let me go to this slide. Where's our guardian angel, right? It's a good
Defendify,
question.
we can help.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you are a service provider, Shannon, I totally agree. I mean, Defendify has helped a lot of commercial integrators, a lot of managed service providers, technology service providers, kind of get those processes in place. I do think that finding a group that you can ask questions to, right, to say, hey, you know, as a service provider, how are you dealing with this? I was at an ASCII event a couple weeks ago, and it was great to hear the experiences that others have gone through. And Josh, to your point about the scenario that you do within your company and your teams, man, getting that early before the doo-doo hits the fan, if I can say the word doo-doo there, Josh, like you did earlier. You know, it's funny. I don't think I've dropped an F-bomb, but usually I drop an F-bomb on one of these webinars, and I try not to. But before things go wrong, getting healthy is important.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Well, as a human to human, you know, and to all of you business owners, I really hope that you work with Defendify and get help from the Guardian Angel as your competitor. I hope you don't.
We've talked to a few of your competitors. Don't worry. They know why they're competitors.
That's very funny. So Shanna and Josh, one of the things we always try to take away at the end of these webinars is, out of all of our discussion, tell me an actionable takeaway. I want to hear one from each of you. Josh, I'm going to let you go first on this. and then Shanna, and then I'll come up at the end.
Mine is easy. If you are a managed service provider, do a tabletop with your team. Pick your poison, some kind of ransomware attack, some kind of major, breach against your RMM tool, your own network, your multiple client networks, or you just one big client, gets ransomware because, just tabletop that out. Write out the scenario. Don't let anyone prep. Gather them up it only takes an hour, and identify where the gaps in your preparedness and response are and what you want to change. Putting yourself in the situation and pretending as though it has happened will wake people up and get them in the mindset to help you identify some really clear things that you want to change, because you'll realize where you have gaps.
That's very good.
Search Roundtable Technology ebook. Tabletop ebook. Search it, you'll find it.
All of them in there, and then it has a whole guide on how to facilitate a tabletop. Has 20 different scenarios. You can Google Roundtable space tabletop space ebook, and I believe it will be the top Google result.
So I think we're gonna have, I've got a slide at the end also that talks about how to get connected. I'm just looking through it, so keep that in mind. Shanna, what's another key takeaway, actionable for our listeners from your point of view?
I mentioned very briefly in the beginning of the webinar that I wired $2.1 million to a cyber attacker and that I have a legal background. And the big thing that I want people to take away is that as we see, it's increasing in awareness, increasing in priority, increasing in concern. Doing nothing is not an option anymore. Like I've had so many conversations with organizations who have done nothing, and it gets real ugly real quick. It's not an option. And from a legal perspective, if I were in your shoes, the CYA approach, if you will, if you ever have to find yourself defending, your service provider business in a court, I just want you to think about what that would look and feel like right now with your current cybersecurity posture and what you're doing with your clients. Like, Roundtable has a standard offer that they put out to every single one of their clients. Every single client gets, a basic minimum cybersecurity protection. If you're letting your clients drive the bus right now, and some of them are electing not to implement additional cybersecurity measures, if they don't have a cyber insurance policy, if they have a loss, they're going to try to recoup that in some way or another. It might be a lawsuit against you. If they don't have a cyber insurance provider to fill in some of those, wallet holes, they are going to be looking for someone to blame and to recover some of that money from. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're trying to explain to a non-technical judge or a non-technical jury why client A had certain protections in place, client B didn't, why you're a technology provider that does all the technology stuff, but you didn't do this other technology stuff. Like, good luck with that one. That is not a conversation that I would want to have to be having as a business owner or an attorney trying to defend that. So just kind of think about it from that perspective. Any one of your clients, you can't care more about their cyber posture than they do. Sometimes, I worked with a partner that ended up firing one of their clients because they just would not. We tried a lot of education, and they could not figure out that this was really, really important. They were in a healthcare organization, and they ended up with a situation with triple ransomware, where medical records not only were exfiltrated and held against them, but they also contacted every single patient and ransomed them as well. And they weren't a client of this partner of mine anymore, thankfully. So it was somebody else's problem at that point, and it was one of those like, whoo, we dodged a bullet.
Yeah, well, so what both of you just said there actually takes me back to 2 webinars that we've done in the past. Okay, I mentioned the one about regulatory, which I'll speak to, but another one was about, and you guys have heard this before, but you need to be working on the business and not just in the business. Okay, I recognize that a lot of owners of technology service providers, they're so busy just dealing with the day-to-day activities that they don't have time to think about the future sometimes. Cybersecurity is here, or ransomware, right? The threat of it, I should say, is here. You've got to be ready for it. Every show you go to now where the word cybersecurity comes up, you always hear the "it's not if but when" scenario. It's true, it's fact. You've got to focus on how you as a service provider are going to deal with that.
Everybody thinks it's going to happen to the other guy until you realize that you are the other guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly right. So think about that. Think about how understanding the regulatory aspect of what's going on in this world, be on top of that thing. And you know, we try not to do shameless plugs by any means on the MSP Blastoffs, but I have to say, Defendify, you guys have a really good platform to help you get started if you're not familiar with this. So I definitely encourage you guys to reach out to Shanna or reach out to the Defendify team. So that's definitely my takeaways. We're going over time, so I'm going to get real fast on this. If there are listeners out there that haven't tried Domotz, right, which from our perspective, we didn't talk about it at all, but if you need to start getting an understanding of what's on your networks and what's happening in the network infrastructure, check us out. So you've got that little coupon that you can have when you sign up. Shanna, I love the fact that you guys have this kind of freemium service, if you will, where you know people can sign up, they can go through a questionnaire and kind of do a checkup and get an assessment of, hey, what is my quote unquote threat level at this point, right? What should I worry about? Do you want to make any other comments about this, Shanna?
Yeah, I know this industry. I've worked with several hundred channel partners, so kick the tires. I know you love to tinker. Try it. Take it for a test drive. We just released a new version, new interface. We're super excited about it. But you know, as a service provider, sign yourself up for Essentials. You know, figure out what your posture is. You know, get your letter grade, do your assessment, run an external network vulnerability scan, sign up for threat alerts so that you've got, you know, ongoing notifications about the cyber landscape. If you love it and you look at some of the other tools and you're like, hey, this automation and all of this in one platform, pretty cool. It's also that free service that you signed up for with our Essentials package is also something that you can use with your clients.
Yes.
You know, start the conversations. It's free, unlimited use of the Essentials, those 3 modules that you see for all of your clients. So, you know, try it out. Even if you never become a partner, just like, you know, check yourself. Check yourself.
Well, and I, you know, put your oxygen mask on first, right? You know, make sure you guys are healthy before you start telling other people how to do their business, right? So this is a perfect opportunity for that. You guys, your listeners know how to get a hold of us, support@domotz.com. We want to hear about topics that you think are relevant, so let us know. And then last thing I wanted to put up here, primarily just how you get a hold of Defendify, but also if you want to reach out to Josh at RoundTable, please do. With that being said, any final words, Josh, that you want to put in?
Get started. Like, don't get overwhelmed by how complex and how changing it all is. Just chip away, right? Start, work on it. It's always going to be continuous. You're never going to be completely secure. So don't worry about how all the gaps you have now. Just start identifying them and chipping away at them. It's going to take time. So just make it part of your regular work, just like everything else.
Well said. Very well said. Shanna, any other final words before I thank everybody?
Nope. I stay safe. It's a jungle out there.
Don't poke yourself in the eye with a used bar toothpick, something like that, I'm sure. Yeah. So thank you everybody for listening in. I really appreciate your time. I know we went a little bit longer, but I think this is an extremely relevant topic, an extremely important topic. We look forward to talking to you the next time. By all means, it's October, it's Cybersecurity Health Month. You know, do what you need to do to make sure that you stay safe and keep all of your customers safe. Thank you very much, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks all.
Thank you.